Sirens screamed in my own driveway as 2 cops pointed flashlights at me, demanding I explain why I was trespassing on my property. The HOA president stood on my porch, arms crossed, smiling like she owned my mansion because, impossibly, she'd been living in it for months. I'm Daniel Voss, 42, an oil rig engineer who'd spent 8 months overseas, leaving my late father's mansion locked, waiting for my return. Deborah Klein ruled our gated community like a queen, fining neighbors for wrong mailbox colors and unapproved lawn ornaments. Before I left, Deborah offered to watch over my house, insisting HOA presidents traditionally checked on absent owners' properties.
I trusted her.
Signed a spare key form, never imagining that small gesture would hand a stranger my entire home. My neighbors warned me she'd once forced a widow to repaint her door 3 times, but I dismissed it as gossip. 2 months into my contract, my sister texted photos. Unfamiliar curtains hanging in my windows, a strange car in my driveway. I called Deborah immediately. She laughed it off, claiming she was airing out the house to prevent mold damage. Weeks later, my mail stopped arriving, redirected. The post office said, per a forwarding request I never authorized or signed. My property manager, conveniently hired by the HOA board, stopped answering my emails about routine maintenance inspections entirely. A neighbor sent me a video, Deborah hosting a backyard barbecue at MY House, introducing guests to her new home. Furious, I video called Deborah, demanding answers. She calmly claimed my house had been legally abandoned per HOA bylaws. She cited a clause requiring absent owners to notify the board every 90 days, which I'd apparently violated once. I explained deployment contracts made monthly updates impossible, but Deborah insisted rules were rules. No exceptions for anyone. She'd filed an abandonment notice, posted it on my door for 10 days, then declared the property HOA-managed housing. My lawyer back home said such claims held 0 legal weight, but Deborah had already changed every single lock. She'd moved her furniture in, rented my late father's study to a coworker, splitting the mortgage-free space for profit. Neighbors who objected got hit with sudden fines, unmowed lawns, unauthorized fences. Deborah's signature moved to silence dissent quickly. One brave neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, tried confronting her. His HOA dues tripled overnight, and his car got towed twice. I flew home early, breaking my contract, losing thousands in penalties just to stop this woman from stealing my house. Standing at my own gate, I found the entry code changed, my key useless. Security cameras mysteriously malfunctioning for weeks. Deborah greeted me at the door like a landlord, informing me I'd need to reapply through the HOA housing committee. I laughed in disbelief, showed her my deed on my phone. She simply shrugged, saying paperwork could always be updated. She threatened to file harassment charges if I stepped further onto her porch, citing HOA authority over community disputes. That's when she called the police, claiming a violent stranger was threatening an elderly resident inside her own home. 2 squad cars arrived within minutes. Apparently Deborah had the officers' personal numbers, a courtesy from her community safety committee. The younger officer recognized my last name from the deed records pulled up instantly, but his partner sided with Deborah. They separated us. I sat handcuffed on my own lawn while Deborah calmly served her house guests iced tea inside. At the station, a detective reviewed my deed, my father's will, and my deployment orders, frowning at the discrepancies. He released me with an apology, promising to investigate further, but warned civil disputes over property took weeks to resolve. I stayed with my sister that night, exhausted, replaying every warning sign I'd ignored about Deborah's growing control obsession. My sister found something strange. Deborah's own house had been foreclosed 6 months earlier, records buried under her maiden name. Deborah wasn't just squatting. She'd lost everything and needed my mansion to maintain her image as the community's wealthy leader. I dug through HOA archives online, discovering 3 other abandoned properties Deborah had similarly seized from deployed or hospitalized owners. Each victim had been military, elderly, or grieving, people too distracted or distant to fight back against her forged paperwork. One elderly veteran, Mr. Okafor, had died in a nursing home while Deborah rented his house to vacationers for cash. I contacted his family, alive, furious, and desperate for help, assuming the house was simply being managed by the HOA. Together, we compiled evidence, forged abandonment notices, fake HOA meeting minutes, and a property manager quietly taking hush money payments. The manager, cornered by our questions, admitted Deborah threatened his job if he ever verified an owner's actual return date. Deborah caught wind of our investigation and escalated instantly, filing a restraining order claiming I'd stalked her at her home. The judge granted a temporary order, barring me from my own mansion for 2 weeks pending a formal hearing. Locked out legally now, I watched from my sister's car as Deborah threw a housewarming party. Laughing on my balcony, she posted photos online, captioning them "Finally Home," tagging HOA board members who liked and commented supportive emoji hearts. My deployment commander, contacted by my lawyer, sent an official letter confirming I'd never missed a single required check-in. That letter proved Deborah's 90-day violation claim was fabricated entirely. There was no missed notification, only her manufactured paper trail. Mr. Okafor's family filed their own complaint, and suddenly local news picked up the story. HOA president steals veterans' homes. Reporters camped outside my gate, and Deborah, cornered, gave interviews insisting she was merely a devoted community caretaker. She called me unstable, painted herself as a victim of a returning, aggressive homeowner threatening a fragile elderly community leader. Public sympathy briefly favored her, until someone leaked security footage of her breaking my original lock with a crowbar. The footage went viral overnight, time-stamped, undeniable, showing Deborah smiling into the camera as she forced her way inside. HOA board members, panicking, distanced themselves, claiming they'd never approved her abandonment declarations or property reassignment decisions. The property manager, facing his own charges, agreed to testify fully against Deborah in exchange for reduced criminal liability. My lawyer filed for an emergency hearing, combining my case with Mr. Okafor's family and 2 other victimized owners. Deborah, sensing collapse, tried liquidating her furniture from my house, loading a truck at 3 a.m. Secretly, a neighbor's security camera caught her loading my father's antique clock, prompting an emergency police response that same night. This time, officers checked records first, found the restraining order already dissolved due to fraud evidence, and arrested her instead. Deborah screamed she was the real victim as officers cuffed her on my lawn, mirroring my humiliation weeks earlier exactly. The formal hearing became a media spectacle. Cameras packed outside the courthouse where 4 victims finally faced their tormentor together. Prosecutors presented forged documents, falsified meeting minutes, and testimony from the bribed property manager detailing years of systematic theft. Deborah's own attorney, blindsided by evidence, requested a recess after learning about a 5th undisclosed victim uncovered that morning. That victim, a young widow, testified Deborah had convinced her to sign over temporary management rights during her husband's funeral. The judge's expression hardened, calling it predatory exploitation of grief, while Deborah's composed mask finally, visibly, began cracking. I testified last, describing handcuffs on my own lawn, my father's home stolen while I served overseas defending strangers. Deborah interrupted, shouting that homeowners like me abandoned community values by simply not being present enough. Infuriating the courtroom, the judge silenced her, reviewing forged abandonment notices side by side with legitimate ones, noting identical suspicious handwriting throughout every fraudulent document. Handwriting analysis confirmed Deborah authored every single notice, despite claiming board members had independently verified each abandonment status. The property manager's testimony sealed it. Deborah paid him monthly to falsify inspection reports for houses she'd never actually inspected. Convicted on multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and criminal trespassing, Deborah's face drained of color as the verdict was read. She was immediately removed as HOA president, banned permanently from any community leadership role within the entire county. Officers led her out in handcuffs past the same porch where she'd once mocked me for reapplying to my own home. I stood outside, calm this time, watching the same flashing lights that once humiliated me now finally serve real justice. Deborah received 18 months in prison plus restitution payments to 5 victims, including full compensation for stolen antiques and rent. Mr. Okafor's family reclaimed their home. The young widow received an apology and damages, and the HOA board was completely restructured. I walked back into my mansion, changed every lock myself, and finally slept peacefully home, safe, and legally, undeniably mine again.